You asked for it, folks. The thrilling conclusion to the Resonator saga, where all questions will be answered and all loose ends will be tied up. It's the Resonator, Miskatonic U, Part 2, The Secret of the Ooze. Hello, Scaredy Cats, it's me, Scaredy Matt. I'm so happy that you all enjoyed my review of the Resonator Part 1, enough for me to proceed with reviewing Part 2. Because it keeps me from having to watch and analyze a real movie, one with ideas or themes or purpose. If you haven't seen last week's video, you probably ought to go do that, because nothing I'm about to say is going to make a lick of sense if you haven't. To be clear, what I'm reviewing today is the second half of a feature film that was released over 2 weeks, so out of context, this is going to seem a little confusing. I say second half, but not really. The first half was 45 minutes, and the second was only half an hour, a total runtime of 75 minutes, including 2 sets of opening and closing credits, and 1 previously on the Resonator recap. If you trimmed all of the fat, you could have a nice little short story in this movie, but instead of doing that, what they chose to do was to leave in all of the fat, and then split it up over 2 weeks to kill all momentum that the story had. But they did save all of the good stuff for the second half. The first part had one cool monster, a dancing squid lady that kisses people. She doesn't hurt anyone, she just kisses them. I thought she'd put an egg in the guy's throat that would burst and they'd give birth to a monster, but no. She just kisses people and it doesn't go anywhere. In part 2, we don't just have some dancer with prosthetics. You know what we've got, folks? We got some wet puppets. So obviously the film gets 5 stars from me. It ain't Citizen Kane, but them puppets do be wet. Let me run you through the story. This one picks up right where the last one left off. Crawford's girlfriend Mara and her eyelashes have been impaled through the tummy by an alien tentacle, so they rush her to an empty hospital bed and give her CPR with full chest compressions, and then that doesn't bring her back to life from getting stabbed in the tummy, so they get the defibrillator and shock her back to life from her stomach wound. But it does work, and she comes back to life, so in case you thought there'd be any raising of the stakes there, or any pathos for Crawford, or consequences for the things that happen in the movie, no. No. The unimpaled teens meet back up the lab where Crawford is sadly drinking whiskey and drawing pictures of the Resonator in his diary. And that's not a joke, that's a thing he does in both parts of this movie. So the teens discover that Brian, the guy from part 1, had his head chomped. And they're like, yo, that sucks, Crawford. Maybe you ought to dismantle the Resonator so it doesn't keep letting monsters out? He's like, I don't know, guys, it was kind of like my dad's thing and he's dead and I'm sad about it. And they're like, yeah, but the monsters are kind of a big deal, dude. And he's like, yeah, I guess so. That is until Dean Bad Guy shows up and tells them that Brian was arrested in Quebec for drugs or something, and reveals that he knows they stole stuff to help build the Resonator, so they all have to leave or they'll get expelled. Crawford and Dean Bad Guy do guns about whether they should start up the Resonator, and Crawford shoots the Resonator, so the Dean is like, okay, well, you got an hour and you better have that thing working or else, bud. So the teens go to Mara's house and Mara is already on her feet, hours after getting stabbed through her stomach and defibrillated back to life. They ask her about her parents, Mr. and Mrs. Chekhov's guns.
Random question, but your parents have any guns?
Then Crawford is attacked by Brian's heart, which, by the way, he's been keeping in a jar on his desk the whole time to test how soft tissue reacts to the Resonator. And it's never addressed how fucked up that is. Anyway, the heart gets out of the jar and crawls around and then bites him, and a huge Evil Dead spurt of blood comes out. And Crawford is so done with this shit, he goes full sicko mode on a bunch of monsters, including a beholder and a tentacle. Dean Bad Guy shows up and turns into Davros from Doctor Who, but the teens run in and shoot the monsters, and the ghost of Crawford's dad also shows up and drags the Dean to hell or something, I don't know. Also, the Dean was in cult robes and had a cult necklace, and it was the same necklace that Crawford's professor had been wearing in part 1, so that doesn't really get explained. They're just part of a cult. It's not important. Anyway, cut to Crawford walking around campus. He meets up with Mara and apologizes for the monster stabbing her in the tummy, and she's like, "What are you talking about, dum-dum? That hasn't happened yet. We're in the past." And he's like, "I don't think so. I'm pretty sure we're in the present." But then Brian shows up, and he's with this other guy dressed like Herbert West from Reanimator, and he's like, "Hey everybody, this is my friend, Herbert West," which is Herbert West's name in Reanimator. Then, get this, the movie ends. Turns out none of the events of this movie mattered at all, because they all got undone by the Resonator's ability to send people back in time, but without them noticing they got sent back in time until halfway through the next day. Part 2 is more fun than Part 1 in pretty much every way imaginable. It leans into the cheapo schlock factor, has goofier monsters with some very fun practical effects. Crawford actually starts to become a character as the situation deteriorates and he refuses to let any of it distract him, becoming at once frenzied and stoic. The parts that are genuinely good are better, and the parts that are so bad they're good are worse, making them better. Like this line, for example.
What you don't understand is your father and I both created the Resonator. I designed the schematic, and he took it to the next level. Unfortunately, our motives were completely different. He wanted to help mankind. I wanted to become a god.
Mwah. Oh, just beautiful writing. I don't want to use the Resonator for good. I would like to become a god. Your father and I had different intentions. Him good, me evil. But I'm genuinely confused why they chose to release the movie this way. Separating them makes both parts weaker, particularly when the first part ends on a cliffhanger that is made irrelevant by Part 2 not once, but twice. Mara not only shrugs off getting stabbed in the tummy, it doesn't matter because none of it happened anyway. It's all undone in this new timeline. Like, if you're going to have Crawford go back in time anyway, why not have Mara die in the original timeline so that he has something to react to? Some real motivation. And how come the Squid Lady isn't in Part 2? I really felt like they were setting up something important with the Squid Lady. If you're going to include a Squid Lady warping people's minds and making out with them, there should be a scene later where they're like, "Oh hey, here's what the Squid Lady thing was about." Like, I get it, unknowable and ineffable evil from beyond, that's Lovecraft's whole bag baby. But Squid Lady isn't really any of those things. She's a squid woman doing a sexy dance. Everything else in the movie is blunt and direct, but there's a Squid Lady that they just do not explain. But of course, nothing about the movie matters, because what matters is they had several wet puppets. Once again, 5 out of 5 stars. Perfect movie, no notes. That being said, if you are going to make a Herbert West Reanimator series for Miskatonic U, I'm all over it. I'm there. I'm going to be day one. I'm going to be watching that. I will pay whatever it is you charge for it. I am begging you though, if you do, please, please include a mumble rap version of the song Move Your Dead Bones from Beyond Reanimator. Anyway, I can't think of a Bobby Duke bit, so video over.